Hello students, today we will discuss another new concept in international relations called balance of power. We will particularly discuss the concept in the following way. First we will try to understand what is the meaning of balance of power. Then we will examine whether it is an automatic or a manually operated system in international politics. Then we will be discussing about the important condition required for the smooth functioning of balance of power. So, let us start with the meaning of balance of power. The concept of balance of power in international politics is considered as an important concept on the one hand, and it is also accepted as a theory in international politics. So, we say balance of power as a concept, and we also consider balance of power as a theory. No concept in the study of international relations has been discussed more often than the concept of balance of power. The idea can be traced in the work of Thucydides' Peloponnesian War, Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan, and Kautilya's Arthashastra, what we call in English as Science of Politics, and it is also central to the work of modern realists like E. S. Carr, Morgenthau, Robert Gilpin, and Kenneth Walters. So, these are the realists who have tried to understand the concept of balance of power in the modern sense of the term. Although the theory does not have one exact meaning, the basic logic behind balance of power is very straightforward. Because there is no world government to protect the interest of the states, each has to rely on its own resources and strategies to avoid being conquered, coerced, or even endangered. So, the point is, as per the realist or the realist theorists argue, because there is no world government, the international structure is anarchical. So, every state has to depend on self-help for its own security, for its own survival. When facing a powerful or threatening state, a worried country can mobilize its own resources or seek an alliance with other states that face the same problem in order to shift the balance more in its favor. So, there are two ways: either you focus on internal balancing by mobilizing your own resources so that you become powerful, or you can depend on others through an alliances relationship, those who consider the problem in the similar way as you consider the problem as threatening to your interest, to your security. In extreme cases, forming a balancing coalition might require a state to fight along with another country it previously regarded as its enemy, or it is generally understood as a future rival. So, the point is, in the interest of balance of power, or the logic of balance of power demands that nobody is your permanent friend, nobody is your permanent enemy, and the sole objective is to maintain the balance of power system in the world. So if today somebody is your enemy, so there may be a need that in future you consider him or her as a friend, and that is the reason why balance of power does not believe in anybody as a friend or anybody as an enemy permanently. Thus, the United States and Great Britain allied with Soviet Union during the World War II because their main objective was to defeat Nazi Germany, which took precedent over their long-term concerns about defeating communism. So, even if Soviet Union was a communist country, it became a communist country in the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917, but the United States and United Kingdom, they did not consider that as something very problematic in the interest of defeating Nazi Germany, in the interest of the Allied powers, because they were all worried about the Nazi Germany and fascist Italy and also imperialist Japan. So, that was the interest, that was the reason why, despite having a different ideology, the United States and United Kingdom all shook hands with the Soviet Union. The Chinese, although China was not a communist country at that time, so that was the reason why America and the United Kingdom, they took the help of Soviet Union because they were more worried about the Nazi Germany rather than the prospective problem with Soviet Union with its communist ideology. The balance of power logic played an important role in the US foreign policy, especially when security concerns were unmistakable. So, if you look after the Second World War situation, you will find the balance of power theory played an important role in the minds of the American presidents, American administration, because that was the way they thought could fight a Cold War with the USSR or maintain international peace and security through the logic of balance of power. America's Cold War alliances such as the NATO and the hub and spoke system of bilateral alliances in Asia were formed to balance and contain the Soviet Union, and with the same motive that led to the United States to back an array of authoritarian regimes in Africa, Latin America, Middle East and elsewhere. So, that is how the United States gave priority to balance of power in the sole objective of containing the USSR and its communist allies, and that is why it established the NATO, and as a reaction to NATO, although Soviet Union established the Warsaw Pact, but the main objective was to contain each other, was to maintain balance of power in the world, and that is why the American administration, the Americans, they particularly focused on the establishment of the military alliances, such as NATO, such as SITO, such as CENTO. So many military organizations were established with the objective of countering the USSR, and also they also operated a system called hub and spoke model. The United States was considered as the hub, and the other countries like South Korea, like Japan, like Australia, like New Zealand, these countries were considered as the spoke, like a bicycle, so that they can maintain international peace and security in the Asian continent. So, the problem is this is how the United States operated during the Cold War in its fight against the Soviet Union. Similarly, Richard Nixon's opening to China in 1972 was inspired by fears of rising Soviet power and the recognition that closer ties with Beijing put Moscow in a very disadvantaged position. So, there are records that how Pakistan played an important role to bring China and the United States together, and that the Nixon's trip to China actually broke the ice, and that is how both the countries they established a kind of relationship that was aimed at putting the USSR in a disadvantaged position, and that is how the main objective was to maintain balance of power, so that at least the Americans they could contain the rising power of the USSR. China's military support to Pakistan against India and US's strategic partnership with India against China can also be cited as other examples for balance of power. The Chinese have always supported Pakistan militarily, not just transferring nuclear technology, missile technology, but in all respect they have helped Pakistan to grow as a military power, because the main objective was to maintain balance of power in South Asia. Similarly, after the end of the Cold War, when India lost its support from the earlier Soviet Union, and China was rising as a major power, so the Americans they have in a way collaborating with India, or have established a strategic partnership with India with the sole aim of maintaining balance of power in Asia. So, India it is not just India, the Americans also helping Japan to counter China, and also India to counter China in the largest continent of the world. So, the main purpose is to maintain balance of power in Asia. Now, let us discuss whether balance of power system or the logic of balance of power system is an automatic or manually operated system. There are two different views on this. First, there are realists who consider that it is automatic. There is an international system characterized by anarchy, and that compels the state to follow the balance of power logic. On the other hand, there are others like the non-realist, or what we call the policy makers, who particularly think that it is not the international anarchy or the structure of international relations, rather it is a conscious decision, and that is why it is a manually operated system. So, let us now debate and discuss these two viewpoints in detail. At its essence, the balance of power is a type of international order. So, when we say about balance of power, it's a kind of order, it refers to a kind of order, whether we can say it as a unipolar order, the bipolar order, the multipolar order. So, the polycentric order. So, it's basically equated with a kind of international order that is prevalent at a particular period of time. Theorists, however, disagree about the normal operation of balance of power. So, how balance of power operates, there is a lot of disagreement, and we will particularly discuss the two different viewpoints. According to the structural realists, the balance of power actually is an automatic version of the theory driven by the law of nature, whereby system balance is spontaneously generated, self-regulated, and entirely unintended outcome of the states pursuing their narrow self-interest. So, the realist argument is that it is an automatic version, you do not have much role to play because it operates as per the law of nature. The structure of international relation forces the states to behave in such way, and so that it is spontaneously generated and it is self-regulated. So, you do not have much autonomy, you do not have much free will to decide what to do, what not to do, because you are compelled to follow the logic of balance of power because of the anarchical structure of international relations. Walters declared that as nations averse a vacuum, so international politics averse unbalanced power. So, as you will find that if there is a fire, so you will find a lot of wind coming from different directions. Similarly, because the logic of nature demands that air has to come, air has to fill up the vacuum space. Similarly, the logic of nature demands that if there is unbalanced power, so today or tomorrow that will be fill up. In that way, balance of power operates in international politics. When the United Kingdom created a vacuum in the Indian Ocean after India got independence, and the Britishers withdrew from the South Asian subcontinent, it was the United States that took the mantle that replaced the United Kingdom as the major power in the Indian Ocean. So, the point is somebody has to fill up the vacuum, somebody has to fill up the gap, and that is how this is the logic of nature, this is how the structure of international relations forces the states to behave in such a way. Christopher Lane similarly argues that great powers balance against each other because structural constraints compel them to do so. So, according to Lane, it is the structural compulsions or the structural constraints that forces the states to behave and follow the logic of balance of power. Using similar structural incentives for gain logic, John Mearsheimer claims that status quo powers are rarely found in international politics because the international system creates powerful incentives for states to look for opportunities to gain power at the expense of the rivals and take advantage of those situations when the benefits outweigh the cost. So, according to Mearsheimer, the logic of anarchy, the logic of structural anarchy compels the state not to be status quoist, because most of the states they are interested for hegemony, and because they are all interested for hegemony, so they will be interested for acquiring more and more power, and because there are powerful incentives and they can't ignore, and that is the reason why they always try to take advantage of the situation so that they will always be in a better position than their competitors, than their rivals. From the policymakers' perspective, however, balancing superior power and filling power vacuums hardly appear as law of nature. So, those who are the non-realist, or particularly those whom we can call as policymakers' perspective, they do not accept the realist logic that it is automatic and the states just follow the logic of structural anarchy. So, that is not the reason. Rather, it is not something related to the law of nature. Rather, the logic of balance of power is a conscious decision by the policymakers who have to take into consideration so many other factors that we will discuss now. Instead, these behaviors which carry considerable political cost and uncertain political risk are the product of competition and consensus building among the elites. So, because the logic of balance of power means now you have to take a conscious decision, and you can't ignore the domestic political cost and uncertain policy risks. So, it is a conscious decision the elites, the decision makers have to take, and so there is no law of nature, rather it is the conscious decision you have to think about when you go for balance of power. As Nicholas Spikeman observed many years ago, political equilibrium is neither a gift of the god or an inherently stable condition. If states wish to survive, they must be willing to go to war to preserve a balance against the growing hegemonic power of the period. So, according to Spikeman, it is not a gift of God or inherently stable condition as we find in case of the realist. Rather, states, they want to survive, or if they want to survive in the international system, they must be willing to go to war, and this decision to go to war is a conscious decision because it has a number of political cost, economic cost. So, it is not something automatic, something God gifted, rather it is a conscious political decision by the elites, because their main objective is to preserve the balance against the growing hegemonic power of the period. So, that is the logic why it is not automatic, rather it is a conscious decision, or it is a manually operated system. Thus, the decision to check unbalanced power by means of arms and allies is very much a political act made by political actors, as war mobilization and fighting are distinctly collective undertakings. So, as I said, so these are very conscious decision by the elites, because if you decide to go for a war, you need to mobilize a number of domestic actors. You have to take the opposition into confidence, you have to discuss the issue in the parliament, you have to get the parliamentary approval. If it is a parliamentary system, you have to consult the cabinet minister. So, it is a decision that you can take unilaterally or on an individual basis. So, your decision to join a particular bloc or to follow the logic of balance of power is basically a conscious decision. So, it is not an automatic decision, rather it is a manually operated system. It is based on your cool calculations, it is based on your own conscious decision. Now, let us discuss about some important conditions that is required for the smooth functioning of balance of power in international politics. There are mainly 9 conditions that is required for the successful operation of balance of power. The first is at least 2 egoistic actors under anarchy that seeks to survive. So, when you think of balance of power system, there must be at least 2 important actors whom we can consider as great powers. You need at least 2 egoistic actors because they are instrumental, they are important for the balance of power to operate. Within an anarchical system which lacks a sovereign arbiter to make and enforce agreements among the states, there must be at least 2 important actors or states that seek self-preservation for a balance of power to exist. So, the main purpose of this 2 main actors is to seek self-preservation, because that is how they will contribute for the operation of balance of power. Furthermore, states must be self-interested than group interested. So, the logic of this argument is that if the states are group interested, then it is not actually balance of power, it is something like collective security. So, balance of power demands that you should be more and more self-interested for the preservation of the status quo or the operation of balance of power rather than group interested. Simply understood, states in a balance of power system are not altruistic or other regarding actors, rather they act in a way that maximize their relative power gains and avoid or minimize their relative losses. So, that explains that the states are rational actors and they always try to maximize their relative power gains, and that is why they have to take a conscious decision to support a particular bloc or support a particular party when the balance of power is weak. The second important condition for the successful operation of balance of power is what is called vigilance. States must be watchful and sensitive to the changes in the distribution of power in international relations. So, if you are a major power, if you are playing the role of a balancer, you must be very watchful what is happening at a particular moment in international politics. If there is a power vacuum, if there is a unnecessary accumulation of power by a particular actor in international politics, so you have to carefully consider those kind of situations. When allies are growing weaker, the state must be aware of the deteriorating situation or deteriorating security situation in order to take appropriate measures to remedy the danger. So, there may be a situation when your allies, when your friends, they may get weaker, and in that situation there will be problem of security situation in that particular period. So, you have to strengthen their power, you have to help them to acquire more and more power. Similarly, today's friends may be tomorrow's enemy. So, there may be a situation when some of the states who are with you, they may be very powerful. So, you also have to look into this possibility, because they may be the reasons for creating disturbance or undermining the balance of power operation in international politics. So, in both ways, either your friends become weaker or they become stronger. So, you have to carefully watch them, you have to carefully observe the situation, because under both the circumstances there may be a chance that the current balance of power system or the operational balance of system power may be in danger. Next is the mobility of action. States must not only be aware of the changes in the balance of power system, rather they must be responding quickly and decisively when there is a need for that. So, it's fine that you observe the situation, you monitor the situation carefully, but if there is a need, you have to take a quick decision, because the problem is those who are democratic countries, they are basically slow in decision making. You have to consult the parliament, you have to consult your cabinet colleagues, you have to consult the opposition, there may be debate and discussion in the country, in the media, or you may consult the president. So, there are number of, or somebody may challenge that through judiciary. So, there are so many problems, so many constraints in a democracy, unlike a totalitarian or autocratic country. So, you will not only just monitor the situation, if there is a need, you have to take appropriate and immediate action. That is the logic. So, that is why you have to monitor the situation carefully and take the decision quickly if there is a need to do so. Next is states must join the weaker or the less threatening side in a conflict. So, balance of power operates with this condition that if there is a side that is weaker or the other side is less threatening in a conflict, so you will side with them. That means states, if they are free to choose, flock to the weaker side, because it is the stronger side that creates the problem. So, balance of power system operates with the logic that there are two main blocks, and if one block is weaker, so you have to join the weaker one rather than the stronger one, because it is the stronger one that may challenge the balance of power situation at a particular period of time. Next important condition is state must be able to project their power. Mobility of policy also means mobility on the ground. If all states adopt strictly defensive military postures or doctrines, none will be attractive allies. So, if you just think to be defensive, you always think that it is not possible for me to join the weaker side, or if you are just a country just loving your own independence and sovereignty and you do not bother about others or what is happening in the larger international arena, that may create problem. So, that is the reason why you should not follow very defensive kind of military postures and doctrines, because in that way you will not allow others to join your bloc, or you will prevent others to join your bloc, and if others fail to join your bloc, so you are alone and you can't do much to restore the earlier balance of power situation. So, that is how you should be not only having more and more power, rather if there is a need, you have to project your power internationally. Next condition is war must be a legitimate tool of statecraft. So, when you are a major power, if you want to follow the logic of balance of power, then you should be prepared. If there is a need to fight a war, you should be prepared for it, because preparation for war is the main principle or assumption of balance of power, not peace. So, if there is a need, if some countries are threatening, so you should go against that particular country, against that particular bloc, because that is how you can maintain a balance of power situation or a stable balance of power system in international politics. So, balance of power requires that war must be a legitimate tool of the statecraft. So, You should not consider war as something dangerous or war as something very harmful. If there is a need, you have to take into consideration the war factor also. That may be a final option, but nevertheless it cannot be ruled out, because the larger purpose is to maintain international peace and security, and so you should not be very defensive. You should not be fearing the war option. If there is a need, you should exercise this option. That is the logic. Another condition for the successful operation of balance of power is that no alliance handicaps. For a balance of power system to operate effectively, alliance formation must be fluid and continuous. States must be able to align and realign with other states solely on the basis of power consideration. So, when you form the alliance or when you form any military pact, that should not be so rigid that it doesn't encourage the other countries to join. Rather, if there is a need, so you should follow the kind of alliances that is fluid, that is continuous, so that anybody can come at any time, anybody can go at any time, because that is how you can maintain balance of power. So, if America would be rigid that NATO would not be expanded, so it would not be able to restore balance of power. So, if there is a need, you make Sweden as a member, you make Finland as a member of NATO. So, it should not be very strict about the membership, because of course you need like-minded countries to be its member, but that doesn't mean you will just close the door for others, because in that way you cannot maintain balance of power situation in the world. So, if there is a need, you can also invite Ukraine, and that is the reason why there is a Russia-Ukraine war. So, the point is the alliance should not be a handicap for maintaining balance of power situation. Rather, it should it should be open for all countries, those who think that their main interest is to maintain balance of power. Next important condition is pursue moderate war aims. That means because today's friends may be tomorrow's enemy, states should pursue moderate war aims and avoid eliminating the essential state actors. That means your main objective is not to eliminate a particular country or any particular power which may be threatening the balance of power situation at a particular time, because your aim is not to abolish that country, remove that country from the world political map. Rather, your aim is to maintain balance of power. So, you should follow this logic and allow the defeated country to continue, even if it is defeated, to continue in the international system. You can have so many examples like Japan, Italy, Germany, they were all defeated in the Second World War, but they were not eliminated. So, because they were allowed to operate in the international system, maybe in a different way, but they were not eliminated. So, the logic is you have to pursue very moderate war aims, because your purpose is to maintain balance of power rather than destroying the state system. Next is your reciprocal compensation. Sometimes moderation towards the defeated power is unachievable. Under such circumstances, if the cake cannot be saved, it must be fairly divided. The logic is your main objective is to not create problem for other essential actors in the international system, but sometimes if it is not manageable, if it is not achievable, then what you can do is you have to divide that country, so that in that way when you divide that, you have to follow reciprocal compensation logic, because if you look at Germany and Korea, these two countries were divided. Even Vietnam was divided between the two superpowers after the Second World War, because that is how the West Germany was controlled by America, the East Germany was controlled by the USSR, similarly North Korea was controlled by the USSR, and South Korea was controlled by the United States. Similarly in Vietnam, you find North Vietnam, that was under the control of the USSR, and the South Vietnam was controlled by the Americans. So, the point is when there is a situation that you are not able to deal with the problematic countries, you want to prevent them to create problem in future. So, sometimes you have to divide them and divide among yourself, particularly territorial division of that country can prevent another actor to emerge some way more powerful and create challenges for the balance of power system in that particular period. But your objective is also to compensate the other, because if you take all the prized possessions, that may create problem to the other party. So, in that way, to maintain that kind of situation, you have to divide that country geographically, and you have your own area, they will have their own area. That is how balance of power can be maintained. Let us summarize what we have discussed so far. The idea of balance of power can be traced back to Thucydides, Kautilya, and Thomas Hobbes, who contributed to the development of the concept by examining the dynamics of power relations, alliances, and strategies to manage conflicts and maintain stability in their respective historical and philosophical context. Balance of power refers to the distribution of military, economic, and political capabilities among the states or actors in international relations to prevent any one state from gaining dominance and thereby maintaining stability. Structural realists like Kenneth Walters, Mearsheimer view that the balance of power as an automatic outcome of the state's pursuit of security and survival in an anarchical international system where power distribution naturally adjusts to prevent hegemony. From a policymaker's perspective, balance of power entails leveraging alliances, diplomacy, and military capabilities to ensure national security, deter aggression, and protect strategic interests in global affairs. Then we discussed 9 conditions for the successful operation of balance of power in the international system. In the next lecture, we will discuss the goals and means and methods of balance of power theory in international relations. Thank you for your attention. Goodbye. See you in the next lecture.